All right, this is lesson 4.3, which is writing real-world equations. So we're not solving anything today, just writing equations. And we're going to be using independent and dependent variables to do this. So first, to define it, the independent variable is the variable that stands alone. You can also think of this as it's the variable that does not rely. So it doesn't rely on anything else. It is not changed by other variables. And we, the mathematicians, can choose a number for the independent variable. So, for example, I can choose to eat 5 meals a day. I can choose to eat 3 meals a day. I can choose to eat 2 meals a day. That would be an independent variable, how many meals I'm choosing. The dependent variable is the variable that depends or relies on other things that are happening. For example, your test score depends on other things, like how much you study, how much you slept. Therefore, your test score is a dependent variable. So if we think back to the example I said before, I can choose to eat 5 meals a day. However, my weight depends on how many meals I eat, or how much I exercise, or how my metabolism is. So my weight would be a dependent variable, whereas how many meals I eat is an independent variable. So let's look at these examples. There are 10 more boys than girls. 10 more boys than girls. So how many boys depends on how many girls there are, right? So if there were 2 girls, there would have to be 12 boys. If there were 3 girls, there would have to be 13 boys. So how many boys there are completely depends on how many girls there are, making boys the dependent variable and girls the independent variable. Okay. Sorry. So boys are the dependent because boys depend on girls. Okay. I am 4 inches taller than I was last month. 4 inches taller than I was last month. So how tall I am, doesn't say it here, but how tall I am now depends on how tall I was last month. If I was 4 feet last month, then I'm 4 inches taller this month. If I was 5'2", then I'm 4 inches taller this month. So 4 inches taller, I'm going to include the word now. Now is the dependent variable because it depends on how tall I was last month, the independent variable. Now the key about this is a conversation you have to have in your head. What good mathematicians do is we have this conversation in our head in order to write equations. So let's go ahead and begin practicing that. So, number 1. Again, there are 10 more boys than girls. 10 more boys than girls. Like we said before, how many boys there are depends on how many girls there are. Because we could say there are 1, 2, 3 girls, and how many boys there are depends on how many girls we choose. So the dependent variable is the number of boys, and that depends on the independent variable, number of girls. Okay? So again, 10 more boys, boys being dependent. So the key about the dependent variable is the dependent variable is the variable that's on the left side of the equal sign by itself. So B equals. So as soon as we define the dependent variable, we can write B equals. Now we go back to what we learned in Unit 1. 10 more means plus 10, and it's 10 more than girls. So girls plus 10. Number 2, there are 9 more forks than spoons. So how many forks there are, this is the dependent, how many forks there are depends on how many spoons there are, making the dependent variable the number of forks and the independent variable the number of spoons. So again, because the dependent variable is forks, forks go on the left side of the equal sign by itself. Now we use everything from last unit. 9 more means plus 9. 9 more forks than spoons. So spoons plus 9 will tell you how many forks there are. You can take a look at the answers to these two on the answer key. Looking at part 2, writing less equations. Same idea, just writing less. But notice that these questions are no longer here. These have disappeared. Now we have to start doing this in our head. This is a conversation that we need to have in our own head in order to write the equation. So here we go. There are 10 less boys than girls. Before I go anywhere, I know that 10 less means minus 10. Okay? Now, I know that how many boys there are depends on how many girls there are, making boys the dependent variable. And dependent variables go on the left side by themselves. Boys equal girls minus 10. Number 6, there are 5 less widgets than baubles. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to write minus 5. Put an equal sign over here. 5 less widgets than baubles. However many widgets there are depends on how many baubles there are, making widgets the dependent variable. Widgets equal. And then baubles minus 5. You can check the answers to the next two on your own. Looking at these, I'm going to do them very quickly. There are twice as many boys as there are girls. Twice just means times 2. As many boys, boys being the dependent variable, B equals. Then there are girls, girls times 2. There are 4 times 4. As many cameras as there are watches. How many cameras there are depends on how many watches there are. Cameras equal watches times 4. There are half as many, half times, phones as there are desks. Phones being the dependent variable because how many phones there are depends on how many desks there are. P equals desks times 1/2. Now, this one's different. The total. The total means that we're going to sum two things. The total number of cameras and watches is 10. So 10 equals how many cameras there are plus how many watches there are. One more time. There is a total of 16 houses. So 16 equals how many houses there are plus how many cars there are. Make sure you check your answer key on everything.